Windows Firewall is essential to the security of your servers, both physical and virtual. Let's take a look at how to get into the advanced settings of the Windows Firewall and check to see what rules are on. If the firewall settings are grayed out, it may be because you have a third-party antivirus that is controlling it. What we're going to do is we're going to log into our virtual machine called File Server 2, and from there we'll go into our Windows Firewall. So let's go ahead and minimize VM host 1 and we'll get into File Server 2 using Remote Desktop. We're now in File Server 2. Let's go ahead and get into our control panel and take a look at our firewall. And we can see that the firewall is turned on for all three of our different types of networks. We have domain networks, private, and guest or public. Now, the main difference between these three are that the domain and the private networks has the most amount of ports open, and that's because you're in an area where you trust the other computers around you in general. The guest or public networks has all of the ports mostly closed because you don't trust anyone around you. So we want to make sure that all three of these are turned on because you never know when you're going to log in to either a domain, a private, or a guest network. Let's go ahead and click on Advanced Settings on the left-hand side, and it'll take us into our Windows Firewall, where we can then set up different ports and access to different services from the outside in, as well as the inside out. Let's start with our inbound rules. So if we click on Inbound Rules, we can see the rules that are enabled have the green check mark next to them. If they don't have that enabled, then that means that they are not going to allow that traffic in. Let's go ahead and take a look at where it says New Rule and click on that option. So here we have 4 different options we can choose in order to allow network traffic in. The first one would be a program. And that program would be well known to the computer or the server based on the path. So if we go to all programs, then it will allow all programs in. Of course, that's not a very secure situation. If you go to this program path, we go to Browse, and we find the executable that we want, and then we allow that traffic inbound. Let's go ahead and click back. And now we'll choose a port. So we have a TCP and UDP port. So TCP and UDP run over the IP protocol. And we're all very familiar with TCP over IP for going out to the internet. But UDP is a connectionless protocol that we also use to go out to the internet, mostly for gaming servers and things like that. So we could choose all local ports, which again would not be a secure situation because that would allow all traffic inbound. Or we could say specific ports. Let's go ahead and use specific ports, and in this case we'll just say port 80 for web traffic. Now if you set up a web server, this port should automatically open up, but it doesn't always work that way. So sometimes you have to manually do it. Let's go ahead and click Next. And we have the option to say allow the connection if it's secure, and we can choose that box here and choose Customize to decide what is secure. Or we can go ahead and choose to block the connection. Let's go ahead and choose to allow the connection and click Next. And again, we see our 3 different types of networks again. We'll go ahead and click Next, and we'll give it a name, Inbound HTTP. If you want to describe it, you can, and we'll go ahead and click Finish when we're done. There's our inbound HTTP rule. Now keep in mind when you create a new rule, it puts it at the top of the list. So if you have a block rule, you can also put that at the top of the list or anywhere you like. If, for instance, we put in a block HTTP above our inbound HTTP allow, then that would cause the inbound port 80 traffic to be blocked because it's on top of the one that's allowed. So keep that in mind. Another interesting thing is if you right-click on the rule and go to Properties, you can also make other changes, such as changing it from allow to block. You can choose which computers can access this rule and which cannot. If we go to the advanced one, this is one of the more useful ones, and that is the edge traversal. So by default, it's going to block edge traversal. That means that if someone outside of your network is going to connect to port 80, by default, they're going to be blocked. But if we're hosting a web server, we do want to allow that traffic. So we'll choose to allow and click Apply. If we go to the new rules once again, we can see a predefined list of rules. And if we hit the drop down, we can see a list of well-known various different types of things, such as remote desktop. Now, we've allowed remote desktop, and so that rule is already allowed, but sometimes, once again, those rules don't get auto-created and you have to do it manually. And this is one way you can do it. You can also choose a custom rule as well. You can click Next, and you can choose specific programs or all programs once again, and you can choose various different protocol numbers as well. And you can do all the different things that you saw in the Properties box in this custom rule. Let's go ahead and cancel that. And let's close our Advanced Security Windows Firewall box. The other option here is to turn the Windows Firewall on or off. Now, I don't recommend that you do this unless it's just for testing purposes, because sometimes we don't know whether or not a program or a port is getting blocked based on the firewall. And a quick way to tell that is if we turn the firewall off for all the different types of networks, and then we click OK and see what happens. Then it turns out we have this big red warning that we've got this firewall situation turned off. We can go back to using the recommended settings, and it brings us right back to where we were. Another nice thing we can do, since we're setting up a lot of different virtual machines, is that we can export and import our firewall rule base, so we don't have to keep recreating it. So if you've got the rules exactly the way you want for your virtual machines, then you can go to the advanced settings once again, and then you can go to the Windows Firewall with Advanced Security, right-click, and choose Import and Export Policy. Let's go ahead and choose to export this policy, and we'll just call it Rules, and we'll put it onto our desktop and click Save. Now, if we want to import that policy onto another computer, let's just pretend we're at that other computer. We choose to import the policy, and we get a warning saying that we're going to overwrite the policy. That's okay. Click Yes, choose our rules, and now we've just duplicated the rules onto another computer. Although we mostly touched on inbound rules, there are also outbound rules. And once again, we see a lot of outbound rules that are allowed and some that are not allowed simply by looking at the left-hand side. Generally, we have more outbound rules open than we do inbound rules, so that way our server can get out to go to other servers and do what it needs to do. Inbound rules a little bit different. We know specifically what we want to do and what we don't want to do, so we can go ahead and block specific ports or programs. Outbound, however, it's not so simple, and so we rarely change anything on the outbound side, but it's not a bad idea to just go to various different rules that you don't know if you want to have outbound or not, and you can right-click on them and you can choose to disable the rule. Once we do that, we see that the green check mark is gone, and if we change our mind, we can go ahead and choose Enable Rule. So it's not a bad idea on your very first virtual machine to disable as many inbound and outbound rules as possible, and then re-enable them as necessary as you see various different programs are not working as you expect them to work. As you can see, having your firewall on and set up correctly is crucial to protecting your server infrastructure.